Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Breaking Changes podcast. I'm your host and chief evangelist for Postman Lane. With Breaking Changes, we explore topics from the world of APIs, but we look at things through the lens of business and engineering leadership. Joining me today, we have Jessica Ulyate, Platform Associate Director of Product at HelloFresh. Jessica validated for me that having a platform team is a sign of an organization who's further along in their API journey. But she also left me thinking more about how product management and these platform teams will be engaging. I always start simple with the basics. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Jessica Ulyate. I am the product lead for the platform tribe at HelloFresh. So I started my career as an engineer in mobile software at a startup. And at that time, it's typical startup, like the business people tell you to build something and you build it. And what happens so often is we'd show stuff to clients and it was just wrong. And I was so frustrated with that, like putting all my energy in this. And I figured like, man, there must be a better way of doing software. And that's how I ended up in product management. And I guess like it's maybe the developer background that always stuck with me. Like I like the idea of making the lives of developers easier, and I'm really like excited I can do this. And building a platform and building like common infrastructure to make sure that engineers can spend their time like worrying about actual customer problems as opposed to fiddling with Terraform or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So you just, I would say, described really nicely this kind of, I don't want to say it's a platform, but it's kind of a bridge between business and IT and technical groups that I see. Product management's the number one conversation I'm having with enterprise organizations. They're like, how do we hire, train the next wave of product managers? And a lot of that I hear is from the business side, like trying to, we what you said in the beginning of that, we need it to reflect business needs. But you just also said, which is really the important other part, I need to make developers' lives happy in doing this. So what is product management? Like, how do you define what product management is?
Uh, I I guess all of those things, product management sits at the intersection between like business and actual development and customers. But I mean, I might be paraphrasing it the wrong way, but Marty Kagan has a really nice definition. It's like making sure that you're solving the right problems for your customers in a way that's both acceptable or good for your company and like from a development perspective. And I like that idea. Like there's never just one party involved. There's always like different angles. Like, maybe you can dream this amazing feature, but it's technically infeasible, or the business wants that, but they actually don't, it's not really reflects what the customers want. So I like it. It's a kind of a job with a foot in a lot of different areas. But yeah, like you said, it's bridging a lot of these things. Like how do you bring them together and end up with like let's say the optimal thing at the end for everyone?
But you feel like, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, right? I mean, you got to have feedback loops with all of these stakeholders, and there's no end to it. I mean, there's little ends, sprints and
Yeah.
whatnot. But
Yeah, I guess I'm a person, I like finishing things, and maybe that's sometimes frustrating. Like you said, it never ends. Like there's no, I'd say, gold star if you've reached it and now you can stop product management. But I guess that's what makes it fun as well. Like there's always more things to discover. Your customers change, your products change, the technology changes. So you always have to like keep in touch with actually what your users need, what they want, like what's new tech developments that can enable new things. And I mean, your business as well. I guess your business has its own goals in itself, and making sure that you keep on top of what's important for them as well.
yeah, no, this is definitely the human side of our roles and what we're building. I think a lot of people focus on the tech, but a lot of this is just about the people on the business and the technical side. But you also mentioned platform, and I'm really fascinated. I would say this is another common thread in all the conversations I'm having is this platformification of our enterprise organization. So what does a platform group do? Like you mentioned about making developers' lives easier. What do you do to make it easier?
Yeah. So then the definition that we use internally is that we support the engineering workflow, and we help developers to create customer value faster. So it's things like how do you get them to focus on the things that matter for customers, or external customers, in our case, people who buy boxes, as opposed to fiddling with, I don't know, the craft related to infrastructure, setting up things. And yeah, it's thinking about like what's the common things that all developers have to do, independent of what specific business domain they're focusing on, and trying to centralize that. And I guess for me, it's to like just remove the pain of fiddling with that. I mean, I call it pain. It's for me, it's a fun part. But I think that's what I found frustrating when I was still doing development as well. When you got this great idea of this thing that you want to do, and then you have to install 50 libraries and nothing runs, and you end up filling more time with getting your environment set up than actually building the cool thing that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that enablement I find is pretty key part of every goal. When I talk to business leadership, they want governance, but actually enabling developers to do the right thing is a bigger part of governance than any of the actual details of governance. If because developers will do the right thing if they have the right scaffolding framework, everything around them. But if they don't, they're going to probably be making lots of bad and poor decisions about what libraries and security and other things. But one of the things that I'm seeing with governance and platform enablement is there has to be proper team structure as far as and not team and domains kind of structure for the organization to operate in to kind of be able to coherently define what the platform looks like. So what is the domains and team structure look like for what you guys are building?
Yeah. So I guess it kind of depends on your company and what you define your platform. Like I've seen that the term platform is a lot of times very overloaded as well. Like in our sense, we consider a platform something that enables developers to write code faster. But I've seen other people use the word platform when they build common business things, like a payments platform is another thing. But in theory, a payments platform would still depend on a developer platform. So in our case, when our focus is our customer is an engineer and their goal is to get software into production, uh, we've been thinking about the squad structure and like what does this engineering workflow look like? And what we set out is we try to define this workflow better. Like what are the actual like user journey steps involved? So if you wanted to create software in production, you'd go through the process of discovering information, writing the code, testing it, building it, deploying it, running it, I don't know, looking at like operating it, getting observability and the incident management. So we kind of thought about this workflow, and I mean, it would have been nice to say like we discovered this workflow and then we created our teams. But to be honest, it kind of went the other way around. We created some teams and they kind of worked because we thought like intuitively this makes sense. And then later we figured out the framework that kind of explained the intuition of how these teams were set up. Yeah, so our squads actually, they focus on specific parts of this workflow. So one squad focuses on specific like the coding and testing aspect. There's another one squad that focuses on the release workflow. We've got a squad that focuses on the specific runtime environment, which is Kubernetes in our case, and one group that focuses on observability and incident management. And it works for us, but I also like with a caveat, like I've been operating in this one platform environment, and I think this might look slightly different depending on your particular platform and your particular company.
Yeah, I mean, across the API lifecycle for me, there's a lot of our customers ask us, well, just tell us the way to do it. I
Just give me the formula, please.
Yeah, like the two things, tell us how to do it, and then when are we going to be done with APIs? It's like, well, you're never going to be done, and okay, there's no one way. And so I guess, teach people how to fish, they have to be able to form their own teams. And I guess it feels like that's what you did is you had in mind how to organize it, but then once you did it, it kind of validated itself, and then you explain why and how it works. I think teams have to just have the confidence to do it and have the right skills, but then make it fit to their organization and their culture and their unique industry and how they operate.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I particularly like about this framework, and I said I haven't implemented it in a different org, but I think it can actually fit on a number of different sized platform orgs.
Mhm.
Like if you have a larger platform org, you can make your squads smaller to focus on more narrower bands of this
Mhm.
engineering workflow. If you're in a smaller team, then you can say like, oh, we have to take care of all of this, but then you use it as a way to prioritize like which areas maybe are we focusing on in the like short term or mid term. So my theory is that it's a nice general framework, but I guess I haven't validated it in the wild.
Yeah. No, interesting. So how much of this topology is programmable? I mean, are you guys using Terraform to stand things up and tear things down? Like,
Yeah, I think we're trying. Mostly infrastructure is code based, so we try to have like no rogue things running. Like everything should be reproducible.
mhm.
But yeah, there's automation. I think plays a huge role in if you like working on platforms and trying to make workflows a bit smoother. I'm not sure which
Yeah.
aspect to go into it, but I think automation is life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, making the technology do the things we can't do at scale or repeatable, as you said, is pretty critical. And even me as a human, I can't do the same thing in a repeatable way every day because I wake up in a different mood some days. And so automation's essential, I think, for this to work at scale with the number of resources or people we have available. So,
Yeah.
uh, how do you measure? Do you measure like productivity across this? Do you adhere to any Dora metrics or any way of understanding what's working and what's not?
Yeah, so at least for we try to measure the Dora metrics for our organization. We're kind of playing around with the idea like, are these Dora metrics a good like KPIs for our platform? And the answer is both yes and no. On the one hand side, like the Dora metrics measure like how fast you can deliver things and at what quality. So in theory, that should be a good indicator if you're doing your platform well. However, there's a lot more things that squads can do or the teams can do that are outside of platform's control. So that you're not the sole driver of this metric. So I like to think of it like mobbing. Like a squad can implement mobbing and that can make them, I don't know, it can make the PR process a lot shorter. Like then in theory, their deployment frequency could go up or lead time to change. But
Mhm.
like we don't know that we're doing that. So just looking at that as our sole indicator of success is very difficult because there's a lot of other factors that can actually influence these metrics. So yeah, we've been kind of they're there and we're measuring them, but I'm trying to figure out like what are some more granular things that are more platform specific. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a answer for that yet, but it's actively consuming my mental cycles at work at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think you're in the state that I see everyone. I haven't gotten a solid answer like, yes, here's how we're measuring it. It's try people are measuring it. The ones that are further along in the journey are measuring and pulling the data, trying to make sense of it. But it's the tea leaf thing. Well, I don't know. This is, making sense this quarter, but last quarter it didn't really, and it's just a lot goes into it.
Yeah, and it's a well, I think it is. I think naming things are hard, but measuring things are also hard. it's,
Hmm.
and yeah, there's a lot of things that you can measure, but it's I guess also figuring out what are the right ones and uh, what's the thing. Also, like if you torture any data long enough, it will tell you what you want to hear. So you have to make sure that you pick the right things at the end of the day.
I think I'm going to come up with a observe or a performance framework and call it torture, and like so you can come up with a way of playing with that because it's so true, and you can make anything kind of speak to what you want to see, and you really have to have an honest view of it and an honest conversation because I get my blinders on too where I'll be reading the signals and reading the tea leaves. I'm like, yes, I'm confident this makes sense and we've got it nailed. And then someone comes in from a business unit and goes, no, no, that's not actually meaning anything. And I'm like, well, wait, so I think we need to get out of our silos sometimes, and it's got to be peer review or a group.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's kind of aside from the point, but I read an article recently and the person was writing about, I'd say, pair product management, which I thought was a really nice thing. I think like we think about a lot of times like pair programming, like in a developer community that there's you like
Yeah.
working together on things. And I think the when you get into like product management roles or other more leadership roles, it becomes more isolating, the things that you're doing. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to bring that more actively in my life, like do pair product management or pair something, like just go to someone with a similar role, like, hey, just help me think through this problem. Because like you said, you sometimes get so like stuck in your own specific like tunnel of what you're thinking about that, you know, just a kind of a reality check from someone else usually just like is so valuable.
Yeah, so I just hired someone for my team. She's helping me define what is product management and all the, not for our platform what we're doing, but like for the community in the space, and helping us create workshops and curriculum, because one of the top requests we're getting from our largest organizations is how do we train up the next generation of product managers to be API literate and understand all of this. And they're asking, well, should it people come from technical backgrounds? Should they come from more business backgrounds? But the pair product management kind of fits, like you could almost seek out someone who's got more of a technical background if someone has a more product background. So what's the ideal mix or journey I would say for that you think product managers should follow?
Wow. I think product management is an interesting discipline because I think it's I know there are now university degrees that you can get, but I think
Yeah.
up to recently it was more like you come from somewhere else into product management. You don't, that's not a degree you go and study. So I find it interesting that there is such a diverse mix of backgrounds that bring a lot of people into this product management discipline. Uh, if I think about platform though, like I've recently hired a few product managers, and it was a debate that I also had with like people in my team. Like, do you optimize for people who have more domain knowledge, but maybe less product skills, or like product skills can be more developed, or you do optimize for someone with more product skills with maybe less domain knowledge? And to be honest, I think it's sometimes more difficult to learn product management skills than it is to learn about a domain. Because I think if you're a good product manager, it's you'll always be thrown into a situation where you're not familiar with the product. So you kind of have to inherently have these skills to upskill yourself in what new product you're working on. That being said, I also know like it also depends on the maturity of your group. Like if you prefer to hire more senior people or more junior people. But I've I think previously in my career, I thought like, oh yes, you really need a technical background if you want to do product management well when engineering tools. But I've kind of had to eat humble pie when I've been dealing with some of my other colleagues with no tech background, and they've like asked really, really insightful questions about the domain that are just like, man, you don't need to have a tech background to ask the right questions. And I think
Yeah.
yeah, maybe
That's
that's not a one size fits all answer, but that for me is like the takeaway. It's less about your background and more about like being able to
yeah.
ask the right questions, I guess, at the end of the day.
Agreed. And I'm constantly trying to, I mean, the last, since 2010, part of my career has been trying to turn people on to the API world that's kind of beneath everything. And I find business stakeholders, curious people, ask the best questions and the most obvious. And it's back to me. I get my blinders on technically as a classic white male developer, engineer, 30 years experience. Those blinders go on really easy, and I get locked into specific ways of thinking, and I'm very aware of that from surrounding myself with other business stakeholders, and people go, well, wait, why are you doing that? So I mean, curiosity is like kind of one of the number one requirements of the job for me. Like, is this something you've always been in your career? Like, were you like this back in school and when you were younger?
I guess so. I mean, I like figuring things out. So when you said curiosity, I'm like, yes, that was the right thing to say. Like that, curiosity is a really important aspect. Like you can have a really great person in a role, but if they're not curious about the products thing or about whatever they're working with, it doesn't mean anything. But I don't know. I don't have any stories on hand of my childhood, but
It's all
I guess
good.
yeah. I mean, I like creating things. I think what led me now to the road of like actually engineering and software is like that thrill of like I can create things. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing, and I mean I tend to do that. Like I like baking as well. Like it's a similar kind of thrill of like taking stuff and making something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean I think curiosity is a it's an awesome skill to have. I'm not sure how you can go through this world without being curious about what's going on. It's a There's so much cool stuff.
And it's
Like,
the thing that I interview for. I'm always looking for curiosity over it. I don't do
mm,
coding tests. I just want to I want evidence that someone's naturally curious before they're going to come into
yeah,
my team, because I've had people come into my team who just like, well, tell me what to do. Tell me how to do this. And I'm like, no, like, here's the thing, like, be curious, poke, figure it out. And that's just an essential skill as far as, uh, um, being able to accomplish and figure out where you're going to be. But back to cooking. So do you cook from recipes you find online, from your head, from cookbooks? Like, where do you get your recipes?
I depends in different phases of my life. Like I guess before I had a kid, it was mostly like finding stuff online, and really like at some point where the like food blogging really exploded. It was probably about 10 years ago, and that was like a really cool time because like people posting stuff and it was like read blog posts, people like kind of just making things based on like stuff you see other people making. But I mean, I'm a big believer in recipes for that matter.
Hmm.
Like there's a reason someone wrote down the exact steps. You don't have to go figure it out from scratch. Like, if you've ended up doing something multiple times, then you kind of get a feeling for where you can make the tweaks. But I guess that's my number one frustration. I guess when people I'm like, oh, it's so difficult to bake, and I'm like, there's a recipe,
There's
all
a
the exact
recipe.
steps there.
Someone with a lot of experience figured this out for you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I did more of like, let's say, freestyle cooking. Then now at the moment I've got a 2-year-old son, and what I'm really enjoying at the moment is that I can get a HelloFresh box.
Hmm.
I don't think I would have necessarily thought about buying it if I didn't work there. But man, it's just getting a box with like these are 3 meals you can make this week. You don't have
Hmm.
to think about that.
Hmm.
I feel like it frees up my mind for thinking about actual things like that I want to be creative with.
Yeah. Well, that
Yeah, there's
box. So, like, I have to say it. So, I spent 2010 through 2020 on the road, and me and my wife, and then we settled down, and uh, neither of us cooked. Neither we just ate out all the time. And I didn't marry her because she cooked or did anything. But then she cracked out. She got started getting the boxes delivered, started having the formula, and then she stopped getting it after like several months because she's like, all right. And she just like the training wheels were
got
off.
it.
She started doing and cooking, and then now she's like, I mean, she's got like she makes muffins, finds a recipe for a muffin, and then creates a spreadsheet of data and then like iterates on the muffin recipe until she dials it in exactly what she wants for her like running and what she does. And so I'm just always
It's awesome.
fascinated by the overlap between cooking and recipes and tech. So that's why I asked.
Mm. Yeah, I really like technical writing as well. Like actually, I guess it's part of like documenting things well enables people
Hmm.
to, I don't know, use your things. And one of my favorite things is like if you think about a user guide, it's actually a recipe, like or a tutorial. What you want at the end of the day, someone wants to do something. You tell them like, oh, you're going to make this. I don't know. You can integrate this fabulous library, and then you'll have these features. Then you tell them the prerequisites, the ingredients, and then you just take them step by step, like do
Yeah.
this, do that. I don't know, bake at 200 degrees, and and then you'll have this amazing thing. So it's literally a recipe that you're giving someone, and so I
Yeah.
also kind of like this overlap between like writing and recipes. Like,
Agreed. And so I look at a lot of API portals and API documentation, and my my positioning is you can land on a website and read the marketing for an API. That's one layer. The next is the docs, and then the next is the actual design of the API. And there are varying levels of truth or honesty I find in that. And I find the increasingly people are doing APIs, and it's kind of like the recipe sites. You come across the recipe sites now that where it's like here's a big long
Here's the
story
life
about how my
story.
grandma did this thing. And then at the bottom, there's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, here's the recipe, and they do the SEO.
Mm.
And I feel like some people are doing that with technical writing and documentation now.
Ugh, yeah, that's a bit much because I really relate with what you're saying, like the different levels of honesty
Hmm.
in like the different kind of material you read. And I guess that's at some point in my life I thought like, oh, maybe I like writing, I like tech, maybe I should look at developer advocacy. And it's kind of drawn me to that role as well. Like there's more honesty in my opinion, like the things that are being said. Like it's someone that's actually out there to help people in what they're doing, as opposed to trying to
Yeah.
throw some marketing fluff at you.
Yeah. And that grades of honesty between the marketing material, the docs, and the design of the API, or lack of honesty sometimes, or connectivity, because this is the API product management, is your API and your docs are moving forward with each version. So depending on how how that feedback loop is actually a meaningful relationship between the producer and consumer is a is also in there in the docs. So each version of the docs in the design of the API. If a producer is listening to the consumer and incorporating that into the design and then thoughtfully creating docs, there's just this smooth relationship between producer and consumer. But the ones without product managers in there, I see are very there's no relationship between the producer and consumer. The feedback loop is non-existent or sparse, and so the design, the tech writing is just really poor. So product management's the heart of it, as I see it.
Yeah, and I guess that's a part that I like about it as well. I think in one of my previous jobs, I thought about like I work with APIs, and at the point I was like, man, I love designing the interfaces, but I really don't want to write the code behind it. I thought like, oh, there's no job like this. Like, I guess I'll just have to do product management and other things. But like I said, it's exactly that thing. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the person that actually wants to consume this and go like, how would they experience this? Like, what would they think if they read this? If they had none of my context, what are the feelings that they would get? And one of the things that I frequently tell people when writing documentation, it's like remove the word simply from any of your documentation. Because when you write it as a person who knows it, it's like, oh, it's easy, simply. Like the person who reads it, they go like, they read simply. And when they can't actually do it, it's like this cognitive dissonance. People are like, oh, should I have done this? Am I actually stupid now
Yeah.
that I cannot simply do this? And it's like it's that empathy thing, like putting yourself in the shoes of the people who use it. And
Yeah.
yes.
The empathy is the important piece, and so like my career trajectory is the 1990s. I was a database guy. About 2000, I
Mm.
started building the backend database-driven web applications, distributed, and then I saw APIs kind of poking hole in this classic. Databases were always that classic power structure within enterprise organizations, and APIs kind of started poking holes in that, and I started getting access to feedback loops with consumers, and I loved being out on the front end, and I got really sick of owning production and being a back end developer. So I became a chief evangelist or evangelist advocate. So I'm very much on that road that you talked about.
Yeah. I mean, but that's, I guess, the curiosity aspect. Like, building something is cool, but don't you want to know how people actually use
Yeah,
this?
yeah,
Like, why do they want this?
yeah. Or why
Like,
do
it's,
they not want it? You
or
know?
why do they not want it if you're doing a bad job?
Yeah, I want to know that,
Yeah.
but I don't
Like,
think everyone's equipped to want to know that. Like some people are like, no, I'm a really good programmer. This is great. Of course, everyone's going to want it.
yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's why we're all different people. Like, we have different things that actually tickle us
Hmm.
in our day to day. So I know you get this problem like there are people who like starting things or people who like finishing things. And I guess it's the same. Like, people who like building the technically, like, they want to go deep into the actual the way you create it. And there's people who are more curious about how it's used.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so the evolution of kind of APIs, kind of one of the areas I focus on the most is how it's kind of changed our lives from ride sharing and Uber to grocery delivery to restaurant, restaurant delivery, and then being able to cook at home and what y'all offer as far as, making it easy. So, I mean, is this why you work where you work, or what keeps you coming to work every day and kind of driving what you're doing? Is it helping people cook at home?
I well, the thing is, I feel like I'm very lucky that I can work at a place, at a company that provides food products. I love food. I love eating. I like cooking. So it really like the actual end product that we create, I find very intriguing. And at the same time, I can work on creating developer products, which is like, oh, cool, that's great. I can stay up to date with what tech and what's happening. I can do both of this, or they're both combined into one company. And I guess what I really like also about HelloFresh is I feel like I've worked at previous companies where like there's a goal and there's a product, but like it doesn't really help people. And what I find particularly inspiring, it sounds super lame, but like my company actually tries to make the world better. Like if you think about uh, like the carbon emissions of getting your food to a grocery store, the amount of wastage involved, like there's so much of that cut down with creating a box and delivering it to your house. Like I think first carbon neutral meal kit company or something. And I find that really cool. Like I'm not working on that side of the business where I actually work with the food things, but it's nice. I can work at a company that actually has these kind of global level impact. And I can still tinker around with dev stuff. So it's
Yeah, that's I I've been dealing with turnover on different teams that I manage, and had an interview with one of the interviews I did was with Twilio, a VP that worked at Twilio, and he talked about the turnover after COVID. And there's a lot of people who are feeling just they're calling it the mass resignation. They're just not happy in their jobs, and I think in tech, I think a lot of people got into tech because you're going to make a lot of money, I guess, and then the money doesn't satisfy you, and the tech doesn't love you or nourish your world, and so it just sounds like that. I mean, has this really helped with your mental health during COVID, like having a job and what you care about?
yeah, I guess so. I mean, to be honest, my kid was born like right after lockdown here.
Uh,
So the first year of COVID, I wasn't even working at home. I was just playing doll with a little newborn. But I don't know. I guess that also kind of brings it into perspective. Like it's a like you actually work for a company that does something for the world. And I think when you actually would get to the point where you want to decide to have children, that is also one of the things that kind of runs through your head. Like, what is the like? Is it the responsible thing to have a kid, like with climate and people and everything?
yeah.
And I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's a pretty selfish decision if you want a kid or not. Like, you're not going to save the world one way or the other by having a child or not. But it's nice for me at the end of the day that now I am working at a company that has some ecological impact or some positive ecological impact, as opposed to, um, I don't know. Any example I give is just going to be rubbish.
No.
But yeah, it's a nice aspect. You can feel like there's some meaning in your work that you're doing.
Yeah. I think but I think having kids is another meaningful part. So you got to load balance across these things, having a family, having the meaningful things, but also a work that matters. The first year of COVID, I shipped my daughter off to Seoul, South Korea. She's doing university, and she's actually just coming back next
Mhm.
week. I haven't seen her since. And so I spent it
What?
the first year just stressed out that my daughter's in another country, and like it was
Oh my,
rough, but she did well. She's good.
that must have been insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Is it the first time you're seeing her since like the beginning of COVID?
Yeah. I haven't seen her.
That's amazing.
And it's her first time out of
Wow.
country, out of home, everything. And so with COVID on top of it. So I mean, she's a woman now, and she's like, I mean, she does, amazing things that just kind of blow my mind. She's not the little girl that she used to be. So it's a whole different world. So,
Yeah. I kind of find it interesting that when you have a kid, like you go from being a very independent person, and then suddenly like 24 hours of your day is dedicated to keeping this thing alive. And it feels to me like just the exercise of actually being a parent is just learning to let go from that point. Like where you have to like tightly keep hold of this little thing to keep them alive, and then learning how to
let
just
go.
let go progressively.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
which is a very cruel kind of trick of nature,
it
I think.
is.
But it's
And it keeps getting weirder. Just wait. Just wait. As your little boy.
yeah, I'm not even that far into this journey, but like
With little boys too, it's a whole other game. It's yeah. And with my daughter, it was
yeah,
just as a father, it was just really hard to let her out in the world right now. It was it, but breathe.
yeah, as if the world isn't a scary enough place that you
Yeah,
actually have to.
I know. Like right during like all the Me Too movement, like everything, I'm like, all right, daughter, go out into the world. COVID, Me Too, like yes, it's like, but it's worked out well. She's coming back. She's gonna finish her senior year here in on the west coast of the U.S. and so it's good.
That's nice.
Um, Steering back, what no, that's good. I love these little side journeys. Um, what
Mm.
what what's new and interesting trends? What's innovation look like at HelloFresh? Like what are you looking to do that would push the boundaries that you're not normally doing?
And I'm not going to answer that. I guess for me, like I've been with a platform team in HelloFresh for a long time, and well, more than 4 years, and like being on this journey of taking it from like a loose connection of developers doing things and building this into a proper product led, um, let's say, platform organization. That's the kind of what's occupying my mind at the moment, and I think it's interesting. I think probably 2 years ago I would have told you like we're a really product led group, and as I learn more, I'm like maybe there are some more things we can do. Like there's some better ways. So I feel like I know in the platform space, and so like think about product managers, like thinking about developer products internally. I think that's a big thing that we're focusing on at the moment. Like how can we make this a really strong product led organization for internal developer tools, which I think is a really cool thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, tech wise, I think I mean, as tech changes, I'm not sure like I can wow you with anything technically interesting. There's this blog post. I can't remember who wrote it originally, but it's about like build boring tech or something. And Kamal Fournier wrote like a follow up post about it. Like in platform teams, like you actually have to think about boring tech a lot because you're kind of at the front line of what happens in tech. So you spend a lot of innovation tokens in the company, but it means your responsibility is to make it at least use boring tech. Don't overload like the cognitive load of the rest of your org with like bleeding edge things. Like
yeah,
give them interesting things, but like well thought out interesting things.
yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, that's so again back to the honesty and pragmatism like we tech I mean that was more people oriented what you just talked about and products and customers being customer first and all of that. So does all of that involve dealing with legacy? I mean, when you talk about boring mundane work, I mean moving forward your legacy infrastructure along the way.
yeah. I mean, I guess as a company, HelloFresh, we scaled very fast in the beginning, and I think the company was very successful because we moved fast in tech, and with it brings some sort of a lot of legacy things. So I guess there's always these things about like dismantling our monolith, some other things. And what's interesting, I think when we started with Kubernetes, we were also kind of moving fast at that point. So I recently just had a conversation with the squad that's kind of maintaining Kubernetes. And when we moved fast, it was great. We got people, like we migrated the whole company to Kubernetes in about 6 to 9 months. But now we're dealing with like, what is the next scaling challenge? Like we've kind of got this single cluster set up, and like in the future, like this will probably hold for like X amount of time. But if we want to go to the next step, like there's a lot of refactoring and dealing with technical debt we incurred ourselves to kind of get us to the next level.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not sexy work, but it's kind of going back with previous decisions that were made to optimize for speed, and now kind of relook at them and go like, how can we optimize now for sustainability or scalability
Yeah.
of our platform?
Yeah. No, I think you're right in alignment with some of the other people leading in the conversation across the spaces and federating regions globally, edge kind of scalability, being closer to the customer, that kind of thing, performance. A lot of that stuff, it seems to
Yeah.
be the next. Um,
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I think like that we didn't make the design decisions maybe initially with that in mind, but it's just becoming so apparent. Like there's a, like if we don't solve this problem, I don't know, we're gonna shoot our future selves in the foot.
yeah, yeah, lots to learn there. I mean, I think you guys are, right in alignment with the other, I would say, API economy, as I would call them, game changing ones that have, I had a conversation with 7-Eleven, so the convenience store chain, and how they went
Yeah.
API first to deliver alcohol and respond to the COVID, getting alcohol into everyone's house, and do that globally, but
Oh
do
wow.
that with regulation too, because there's alcohol regulation in different places. How do you scale that, not just technically, but scale that business and legally? I think is an interesting conversation. So
Oh, that's super interesting.
yeah.
And I think about it like a lot of times we want to solve every problem with tech, but more often it's not a tech problem; it's a people problem.
Yeah, well, I have a Venn diagram that I created in 2012 because I worked in the Obama administration, and I did APIs for the federal U.S. government, and I see it as tech, business, and politics as a Venn diagram. And because your API can be perfectly designed, but if it doesn't have a business model, you're in trouble. Or if you haven't gotten the right licensing, or there's other legal or regulatory, you're in trouble. So it's that kind of relationship between those areas.
Yeah, and like straddling a foot in each of them makes you successful.
Yeah. Well, I liked your view of the landscape because it was very people centric, product centric, customer centric. You talked more about that than when we talked a little bit of Kubernetes here, but that's really, I think, what this show is
Yeah.
about, because this is really trying to reach leadership. We're not trying to get to the nitty gritty details. So I really like your view of the space. I think it's healthy and pragmatic, and I appreciate you coming by today and sharing it with us. I enjoyed this.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, and I think I guess pragmatic is kind of the highest compliment you can pay me, so I appreciate that as
Ah,
well.
I can see it because I see a lot of people who are technically very geek out on this, and I'm like, well, wait, this is a world, we're human, and your tech's gonna collide with that human reality, and I don't care how perfect it is. So you got to kind of tone it down, be a little more
Yeah,
pragmatic.
yeah, exactly. I know. But yeah, it was a nice conversation. Thank you also for inviting me. It was we delved into areas I didn't expect to on an API related podcast, but it was fun.
That's what this is all about. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks again to Jessica for stopping by. For more on Jessica, you can find her on LinkedIn, and you can learn more about HelloFresh at HelloFresh.com. You can subscribe to the Breaking Changes podcast at postman.com/events/breaking-changes. I'm your host, Kin Lane, and until next time, cheers.